If you have few or no friends, you probably have these 5 rare traits. If you have few friends or maybe none at all, the world may have already told you a story about yourself. It may have said you're antisocial, difficult, too sensitive, or somehow broken. But let's pause for a moment and question that story, because solitude is not always a symptom of something missing. Sometimes it's a sign of something rare. You feel life in a way that is difficult to explain to people who move through the world on the surface. Emotions don't pass through you quickly. They stay, settle, and leave traces behind. A comment, a tone of voice, a moment of silence, these things register in your body before your mind has time to label them. You don't just notice feelings, you inhabit them. This depth can be overwhelming in a culture that values speed, distraction, and emotional efficiency. While others move on, you are still processing, still listening to what the experience stirred inside you. Because of this sensitivity, environments matter to you more than most. Crowded rooms, loud laughter that feels forced, conversations that revolve around status or performance can drain you rapidly. It's not that you dislike people, it's that your nervous system is constantly scanning for sincerity. When it doesn't find it, your body tightens, your energy pulls inward, and withdrawal becomes a form of self-protection rather than avoidance. You are often misunderstood as distant or aloof, when in reality you are simply trying to stay regulated. You sense emotional undercurrents others miss. You feel when someone is holding back, when words don't match intention, when kindness is transactional rather than genuine. This awareness makes it hard to relax in shallow connections. Laughing along while something feels off inside would require you to betray your own perception, and that kind of inner split is something you've learned to avoid. So you choose fewer interactions, not because you lack interest, but because authenticity matters more to you than participation. Feeling deeply also means you carry joy and pain with equal intensity. Beauty moves you unexpectedly. A piece of music, a memory, a quiet act of kindness can bring tears to your eyes without warning. At the same time, loss, rejection, or emotional distance can echo inside you long after the moment has passed. You don't have an off switch for empathy. You absorb the emotional states of others, sometimes confusing their feelings with your own, and this can be exhausting without safe places to release it. Over time, you may have learned that depth requires boundaries. You cannot give your emotional energy indiscriminately without becoming depleted. So you become selective, careful, and inwardly focused. What looks like isolation from the outside is often a form of respect for your own inner world, an acknowledgement that your sensitivity is not a flaw to be corrected, but a capacity that needs care, space, and truth to survive. You have an instinctive awareness for what is real and what is performed. It isn't something you consciously analyze. It happens automatically, almost at a bodily level. You sense the gap between words and intention, between smiles and sincerity. When someone is trying to impress, dominate, manipulate, or seek validation, your system picks it up immediately. This doesn't make you judgmental, but it does make you cautious. Pretending creates noise inside you, and your nervous system reacts by pulling away. Social environments often require a kind of mutual agreement to overlook these inconsistencies. Many people learn early that belonging depends on adaptation, on shaping themselves to fit expectations. You, however, feel the cost of that adaptation too sharply. Playing along with false enthusiasm or forced confidence creates an internal tension, as if you are being asked to betray something essential within yourself. Over time, this tension becomes intolerable, so you opt out quietly rather than participate in something that feels misaligned. You notice how people curate versions of themselves for approval. You see how conversations become transactions, how vulnerability is sometimes used strategically rather than honestly. This awareness can feel isolating because naming it often disrupts social harmony. So instead, you hold it internally. You listen more than you speak. You observe patterns. You wait to see who relaxes into authenticity when the performance is no longer rewarded. Because you see through pretending, trust is not given easily. You are not impressed by status, charisma, or popularity. What matters to you is congruence, the alignment between what someone says, feels, and does. When that alignment is missing, your body registers unease even if your mind cannot immediately explain why. This makes casual connection difficult, not because you are closed, but because you are attuned. You may have been told that you are too serious, too intense, or too perceptive for your own good. In reality, Your sensitivity to inauthenticity is a form of self-protection. It keeps you from merging with environments that would require you to abandon your values or numb your perception. You would rather be alone than constantly translate yourself into something more acceptable. When you do encounter genuine presence, your defenses soften almost instantly. There is relief in being with someone who isn't performing, who allows silence, uncertainty, and imperfection to exist without apology. These moments remind you that connection doesn't need to be loud or frequent to be real. They confirm that your distance from most social spaces is not a failure to connect, but a refusal to connect without truth. At some point early in life, you realize that relying on others to consistently meet your emotional needs was uncertain. This realization didn't arrive as a clear thought. It settled into your body as an adaptation. You learn to quiet yourself, to manage your emotions internally, to become observant rather than expressive. Instead of reaching outward for comfort, you turned inward. What began as survival gradually became skill, and that skill shaped the way you relate to the world. You became highly aware of your internal states. You learned how to calm your own anxiety, how to distract yourself from disappointment, how to sit with sadness without expecting rescue. This self-regulation allowed you to function independently, but it also created distance. When you can contain your emotions alone, the urgency to seek others diminishes. You don't reject support, you simply don't assume it will arrive, so you prepare to carry yourself instead. This early independence often goes unnoticed by others. From the outside, you may appear composed, capable, and emotionally steady. Few people see the effort behind that steadiness. Fewer still recognize that it developed not from abundance, but from necessity. You learn to read the room, to anticipate moods, to adjust your behavior to maintain internal balance. This adaptability helped you survive, but it also taught you that closeness requires caution. Because you regulated yourself so early, vulnerability may feel unfamiliar or risky. Letting someone witness your raw emotional state can trigger discomfort, not because you lack depth, but because you learned that exposure didn't always lead to safety. You may prefer to process experiences privately, sorting through emotions on your own before sharing anything outward. This doesn't mean you don't desire connection, it means you value emotional containment. Over time, solitude became a place of control. Being alone allowed you to regulate without interruption, without having to manage others' reactions or expectations. Social relationships, with their unpredictability, can feel dysregulating in comparison. So you choose fewer connections, ones that respect your pacing and don't demand constant emotional availability. What many mistake as emotional distance is often emotional responsibility taken too early. You became your own anchor before anyone taught you how to rely on another. This capacity is powerful, but it also carries a quiet cost. The part of you that learned to self-regulate so well still holds the memory of having to do it alone, and that memory shapes how close you allow the world to come. You are not drawn to accumulation when it comes to people. More contacts, more conversations, more invitations do not automatically translate into fulfillment for you. Instead, your attention moves toward depth, toward the quality of an exchange, rather than the frequency of it. You listen for substance, for honesty, for moments where something real is being shared rather than performed. Without that element of meaning, interaction feels empty, even draining. You sense that relationships shape the nervous system. Every interaction leaves an imprint, subtle or strong, and you are careful about what you allow to enter your inner world. Casual connections that revolve around gossip, comparison, or distraction don't nourish you. They ask you to fragment your attention and dilute your values. Over time, you learned that it is better to have fewer relationships that allow you to remain whole than many that require you to shrink or adapt. You are comfortable waiting. You don't rush intimacy or force belonging. If connection is not rooted in mutual respect and curiosity, you would rather remain alone than participate out of fear of missing out. This patience is often misunderstood as detachment, but it is actually discernment. You are not rejecting people, you are honoring your internal sense of what feels right. When you do connect, you show up fully. You remember details, hold space, and listen without needing to fix or impress. You value conversations that move beyond roles and identities into lived experience. This kind of presence is rare, and it naturally limits how many people you can maintain close relationships with. Depth requires energy, and you are unwilling to spread that energy thin, just to appear socially successful. You may notice that you don't miss people easily, but you miss them deeply. The bonds you form are not interchangeable. Each one carries its own emotional weight, its own history, its own meaning. Losing or outgrowing a connection affects you profoundly, which is another reason you choose carefully. You understand, perhaps unconsciously, that depth comes with vulnerability. In a culture that measures social worth by visibility and reach, your approach can feel out of step. But you are not interested in numbers as proof of value. You are interested in resonance. You want relationships that allow silence, disagreement, growth, and honesty without threat. You seek the kind of connection where you can be fully yourself without explanation or performance. What appears from the outside as social minimalism is often an inner commitment to living with integrity in how you relate to others. There are periods in life when movement slows, not because something is wrong, but because something essential is taking shape beneath the surface. You may find yourself withdrawing from social engagement, not out of bitterness or fear, but from a quiet inner pull toward reflection. This is a time when your system is reorganizing, digesting experiences that could not be fully processed while life was louder. Integration requires space, and space often looks like solitude. During this season, your attention turns inward. Memories resurface without warning. Old emotions ask to be felt rather than suppressed. Patterns you once relied on begin to feel uncomfortable, even restrictive. You may notice a growing intolerance for noise, urgency, or distraction. Activities that once kept you occupied no longer satisfy because your nervous system is asking for coherence rather than stimulation. You are not isolating yourself from life, you are making sense of it. Integration is the process by which fragmented parts of experience are brought into alignment. Grief meets understanding. Survival strategies meet awareness. Past versions of yourself are acknowledged rather than disowned. This work is subtle and largely invisible to others, which can make you feel out of sync with the world around you. While others are expanding outward, you are consolidating inward. Relationships can feel especially challenging during this time. Social roles may no longer fit. Conversations that avoid depth can feel exhausting, while explaining your internal process feels impossible. You may pull back not because you don't care, but because you don't yet have language for what is happening inside you. Integration often happens below words, in the body and nervous system, before it becomes something you can articulate. This season also brings a reevaluation of identity. Who you are when you are not performing, pleasing, or coping becomes more important than who you appear to be. You may grieve lost connections or previous ways of being, even as you sense that something more authentic is emerging. The tension between letting go and not yet knowing what comes next can feel unsettling, but it is part of the process. Solitude during integration is not emptiness, it is containment. It provides a boundary within which transformation can occur without interruption. You are gathering yourself, learning how to live from a place that is less reactive and more grounded. Though it may feel lonely at times, this season is not a detour from connection, but a preparation for it, allowing future relationships to be formed from wholeness rather than need. So if you have few or no friends, don't rush to diagnose yourself. Ask instead, what truth am I protecting? What depth am I honoring? What version of myself is being formed here? Connection will come, not through forcing, not through chasing, but through resonance. And when it does, it will feel less like meeting strangers and more like coming home.